Donna, you've been doing research and work in the space of gendered violence for quite a long time. Could you tell us a little bit about, how you got into that work?
I had a long-standing interest even as a teenager in high school around sexism and gender inequality. And so it was one way in which I could work in the space, which was very oriented to trying to look at the violations of women's human rights and address the violence that they've been experiencing at both kind of the structural level and the policy level, as well as kind of, hearing the stories and the narratives of women themselves. I think one of the things that struck me when I did my first piece of work, which was a small study, was the absolute generosity of women to tell me the most incredible details and about their personal lives, and the willingness and the generosity to share so that other people can learn from this and we can change things into the future. So I think that's sort of, for me, the privilege of the work and why I've continued to do it. Kari, can you tell me, given your work experience, what involvement have you had in addressing issues around various forms of gendered violence?
Well, as a union official, I've come across it in a lot of different areas. So at its most basic level, representing women who have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. It's really their stories that really motivate me to, do work in this space. I've seen women and employers actually look for responsibility, on the woman, victim blaming at its best. They look for things like, did she engage with the perpetrator? Was there any reciprocation? And they're looking for that get out of jail free card so they don't have to address it. So I've seen that happen quite often with representing workers.
Are there ways to support workers to combat gendered violence in the workplace in other various ways, in an everyday way?
They could talk with their health and safety representatives. Gendered violence in the workplace at its core is a health and safety issue. The HSRs, they do actually have a lot of powers. They have the right to conduct inspections. They have the right to view and see documents relating to health and safety. They have the right to be consulted and be a part of decision-making when it comes to health and safety. So in particular, if someone's being sexually harassed in the workplace, talking to an HSR can be really helpful. But it's also about, trying to stop that hazard, because it is, right? That person is a hazard in the workplace that, is causing harm. So, HSRs, some of their biggest powers that they have is they can actually put a provisional improvement notice on to the employer, which forces them to rectify, any breach of the Health and Safety Act. So what they can do is say, you're not, providing and maintaining a healthy and safe work environment. You have, 8 days or more to rectify the situation. And if it isn't rectified, then we can actually get a work safe inspector to come in and make a decision on this. So that is a really powerful tool. They can also direct people to cease unsafe work. So if there is a perpetrator in the workplace and it's, common knowledge that this person is doing the wrong thing and the employer isn't doing anything about it, that's an imminent risk and a serious one to the workers in that workplace. And HSRs actually have the right to say, you know what, we're ceasing work. I'm telling you that you cannot work with that person. You shouldn't be in a room with that person because we know that that person is going to cause some serious harm. So some really powerful things that HSRs can do to support workers in the workplace and to hold employers accountable and force change within the workplace. So we've done some really great work pushing through some new codes of practice, some around psychosocial hazards, but also about violence and aggression in the workplace. And what's great about that particular code of practice is that it does talk about how do you set up prevention plans, what sort of training and education is needed to ensure that everybody is across sexual harassment in the workplace and what can be done about it. And there's also, information about how to actually respond to incidents when they occur. So that's a really great code of practice that people can look to for information to tackle this. But also on a national level, there's now a positive duty on employers to actually prevent sexual harassment from occurring in the workplace. And if they don't take proper steps to ensure that that's not occurring under their watch, they can actually be held accountable for sexual harassment as well.
Kari, one of the things that I know from the work that I've done over a long time is a lot of women are working whilst they're experiencing domestic and family violence, whilst following a sexual assault, and also while they're being sexually harassed in the workplace. So they're in the workplace, and I think that's one of the things that often people overlook, and they assume that when people are having these experiences that they're somehow outside the workplace. So for people who are kind of experiencing these things who are in the workplace, what sort of things could unions do, or what would be your advice for those women?
If you're actually experiencing family and domestic violence, there are things that you can do in the workplace as well. It's now part of the NES, the National Employment Standards, that everyone has access to family and domestic violence leave. So it is important that if you need time, even to just catch your breath, or to go to court appointments, or to get yourself or your children into a safe place, you can access that family and domestic violence leave. And women really should not be afraid to ask for it, and they shouldn't feel ashamed to ask for it. Unions will support you in accessing if there are any issues with that. But it is a huge cultural change that we've been able to make. So we really want to make sure that women are supported in accessing it when they require it.
Also in the code of practice, what other workers and colleagues can do to support the person or raise the issue, which I think is similarly one of the issues that's really important with unions, because what we've seen is the individual might be targeted and other people kind of look away because they don't want to be the next target of that, or they don't want to get in trouble with management and the boss. So I think that's, for me, a really powerful statement too about its unacceptability in the culture.
I think if we're standing up against, victim blaming, using a shared set of language, talking about it all of the time, then workers will feel empowered to do the same thing. Health and safety representatives will feel more supported and equipped to deal with it as it comes. So I don't think that we can talk about it enough, especially before it happens, to make sure that we've got really good systems in place to combat it as best as possible. Being a union member is really important because you have that backing of your union official, the workers in your workplace, and collectively you can do things to change what's happening in the workplace.
A really powerful statement of that shift in community attitudes, that this is something you actually need to actively prevent.
If we're talking about it, if it's out in the open, then it can't be hidden in the shadows like it so frequently has been.